My name's Mary. I'm here interviewing David Silver, who is a professor of media studies at the University of San Francisco. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do in general in your job?
Sure. I'm an assistant professor for media studies, going up for tenure this year at the University of San Francisco. And I teach a number of classes, the intro class, which is our kind of introduction to media studies. And then I teach all of our digital classes, so like digital democracy, digital literacy, and eventually digital production. And then so my research is really focusing on digital media and culture and kind of participatory cultures.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of exactly what our presentation topic is about the use of YouTube in an academic setting, specifically the ways in which academic libraries can use YouTube as a teaching tool.
Great.
So I'm curious to know if you have any experience in either your own classes or in other people's classes in ways in which professors in an academic setting have used YouTube in order to supplement the curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the first example is just it's much easier and convenient. I remember I had to cart in 3 or 4 VHSs and then bring in the whole TV with VCR. Now it's incredible that almost the entire world media library is on YouTube. And so the classic example is, I'm teaching 1984 for the last 2 weeks, and so I go to YouTube in the middle of class because we have a wired classroom. In the middle of class, I'll go up there and show like a 10-minute segment of 1984, the film. Or I can we start getting into conversations about, well, how has 1984 made its way into popular culture? So I can show Rage Against the Machine's Testify video or Terry Gilliam's Brazil or something like that. So the first example is just really kind of an old school, this is a media kind of distribution viewing device. The second thing, though, is that I've been telling students constantly, and there's always a time when you're giving a lecture, you're in the middle of class discussion, where you want to encourage them to understand that they really have to look and be closer to the media text. Okay, so I have a benefit teaching media studies because everything that I'm studying is basically on YouTube.
Right.
Yeah. And so if we're talking about, for example, let's use just a really relevant example. If I'm talking about doublethink, and doublespeak from 1984, and a student says, yeah, what about McCain's speech last night? That's a tangent that's really interesting. Instead of having to just say, well, we'll get to that later, I can say, okay, everyone, YouTube that, and I expect you to understand it, so we'll talk about it next Thursday. So I'm actually having enough faith in YouTube that something will be there. But then the flip side of that is that I'm also kind of assuming that I put it out there as if it's a regular source and a legitimate source. And so I'm not really complicating that yet, maybe later in the semester, and that would come up with a different example if you want to talk about that. But yeah, I'm kind of introducing it both as a media production tool and a media research tool.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you have used it in 2 different ways. One, as a resource, basically, and as a more convenient resource than carting in a video VHS tape player and playing things. And then also, 2, as a way to bring immediacy to a topic and a way to be able to access information kind of at the touch of a button. Right. And you're saying that you're aided by the fact that the classrooms, I know a little bit because I actually graduated from USF, that there's smart classrooms, so classrooms that are wired, so you have control at a console, and then you can project things up for the class to see.
Exactly, and I know that they're going to be able to find stuff. So normally I would have said, go to the library or go to your own community and research this or that. Now I'm kind of suggesting that they go to YouTube as a library. And again, the reason I can do that is because in media studies, whether we're studying America's Next Top Model or 1984, it's all there. It's all there. Yeah.
Now, I know one of the challenges that you said that you haven't really broached in your class and that you might is the challenge of the legitimacy of the source.
Right.
And can you speak about that?
Yeah.
Just maybe not how you've used it in the curriculum, but how you might think that you might frame that in the future for your students?
Well, yeah. Can I answer that in a different way?
Of course.
Yeah. So we were talking about the history of television, you know, these great lectures of the history of television in 7 minutes, you know. And one classic example that media studies scholars like to look at and political theorists like to look at is the classic debate between Nixon and Kennedy. And during this debate, Nixon started to sweat, Kennedy was very tan, and what they noticed was that TV viewers thought Kennedy won and radio viewers thought Nixon won. And so I use that as kind of an interesting example of kind of the real coming on of visual culture in American culture and also American politics. So a student in the back row said, let's see it, you know, I thought it was great. And just the fact that if someone said to me any other time, other than the age of YouTube, you know, let's see it, I would have to say, well, I'll bring it in 2 days or next week. So anyways, I go to YouTube, find it, and I start playing it. I notice like it's a minute clip or something like that. And it was beautiful because it was all black and white and grainy, and it started saying, it was just really interesting for the students to see it firsthand. And you actually can see some of his sweat. He just looks he looks a little bit mildewed, you know? Yeah. But then, about a minute into it, Nixon's face erupts into a monster and like turns into this green beast and starts going, row, row, row. And I lost it. I thought it was an amazing moment. My students lost it. And what happened was it was a perfect opportunity to talk about the legitimacy of YouTube. I mean, I can talk about it kind of earnestly and solemnly and say you have to check your sources, or we can have it staring us right in the face. This is what happens when you use YouTube. There's a lot to be gained from it, but you always have to check your sources or second check them and stuff like that. And so I couldn't have asked for a better example to come out of that. It was just such a perfect teaching moment. But there's no way I could have scripted that.